Hi boys and girls, Miss Hall here. Today we're going to be talking about how to use shapes like rectangles and squares and circles to create our very own robot collage, and you'll even notice that it has its own zigzaggy arms that can move on its own. For this project you're going to need some paper. You're going to want some colored paper as well, so I have a white paper that I glued onto, and I have colorful paper that I used to make the robot. If you don't have any construction paper, you could also cut up post-it notes, you could cut up newspapers, or you can take plain computer paper, color it with crayons, or paint it with watercolors. Let that dry, and then you could cut that up as well, and that would also work. You'll also need a glue stick and some scissors. Let's jump in.
Hello artists, so today we're going to be making our robot collage. A collage means you're using small pieces of paper to create your image. Now for today I'm going to be using some construction paper that I cut into rectangles and squares. You'll see I cut them down into pretty small pieces. If you don't have any construction paper, that's totally fine. You could cut up newspaper, you could take computer paper and maybe paint it with some watercolors, let that dry and cut that up. You could cut up old pieces of mail you don't need anymore, or you could even cut up post-it notes if you have those as well. You just want some different colors to work with. I also have a plain white piece of paper that I'm going to be gluing onto. I have a pair of scissors. I have some glue. I'm using a glue stick today. And I also have some markers to add some color and some details later. You could also use crayons or colored pencils or really whatever you have in your house, but this is what I'm going to be using today. So first things first, let's talk about some of the tools that you're going to be using today. We need to talk about how to use our scissors. Now here's how Miss Hall uses her scissors. I think about it this way. I'm going to use my two peace sign fingers. So you can say, peace dude. And then I'm also going to use my thumbs up and say, oh yeah. So one more time, peace dude and oh yeah. My peace dude fingers go in the, let me pick one that has a bigger hole on it. My peace dude fingers go in the big hole on my scissors. And then my thumbs up goes in the small hole on my scissors. And that way I can open it up wide like an alligator and go chomp, chomp, chomp. You really want to make sure that you're holding your scissors the right way because you want to make sure that you are using them safely. So you can use your scissors to cut the papers that you want into nice big rectangles and squares that you can use. So scissor safety, very important. Now I have a nice little pile of squares here. I'm not going to use all of these, but you can always cut them and make a few different robots if you'd like. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick out the ones that I want to use. I want to have a nice big one for the head, and then I'm going to work my way down my piece of paper. Maybe I'll change the colors up as I go. Add a little orange one. And I'm going to have a line of my rectangles, and this is going to make the body of my robot. So that brings us to our next tool, which is our glue stick. So here's some things we need to know about our glue stick. Number one, you always want to make sure when you're not using it to keep the cap on, that's going to help it from drying out. Number two, there's a little knob at the bottom that you turn to make the glue come up and also turn the other way to make it go down. You want to make sure you're only seeing a little bit of glue at a time because if you have it twisted all the way up, what could happen is that your glue could accidentally break off while you're using it, or these sides can dry out and make your glue not very useful anymore. So I'm going to twist this down so I can just see a little bit of my glue. And now I'm ready to go. Now one mistake I see my students make a lot is that they smear their glue on the white piece of paper and then try to place their pieces on top of it and hope that they fit. But what that can make is sometimes you can have extra glue sticking out on the edges of your shapes and then your project winds up being icky and sticky and nobody wants that. So instead of putting the glue on the background paper, you want to take the glue and put it on the objects you are adding to your collage. So I'm going to take my glue and I'm going to go around the edges of my rectangle, maybe a little bit in the middle. Then I can flip it over, press it down, make sure my fingers go around the edges, give that glue a little bit of time to dry, and now my first shape is down. So now I'm going to do that on the rest of my rectangles. I'm going to go around the edges, little in the middle, flip it over, run my fingers over it, let that glue dry. I'm going to keep working my way down. All right. All right, so you'll notice that I didn't glue mine in totally a straight line, and you also might need to go back, put a little bit more glue, push them down if you have some corners that are still coming up. So now we can talk about what we need to add onto our robot. And for right now, I'm going to put the cap back on my glue. Hear it click. That way I know that it's not going to dry out. So for this one, I have some long, skinny rectangles. You'll notice that this is a rectangle too, but they're just a different shaped rectangle. This one's long and thin, and this one's more square. So I'm going to have some long, skinny rectangles because I want to use these for the arms and the legs of my robot. But I want to make these really 3D and stand out. So I'm going to be using a kind of zigzag shape to add on to my robot. So that way we've got something that sort of moves around. So to make that zigzag shape, it's really, really easy. All I'm going to do is start at the end of my purple piece of paper, and I'm going to fold it over just a little bit, just a tiny little bit. See, that's all I did. And then I'm going to take that end and I'm going to fold it back. Fold it forward. Doesn't need to be perfect. Fold it back. And you'll see that as I'm doing that, I'm creating this zigzag line. So one more time, I'm going to fold it up, fold it down. I'm going to keep on going until I get to the end. And then when I let go, I have this cool kind of zigzag that I can use to do one of the arms for my robot. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other two because I want my legs to be like this. If you don't like this zigzag look, or if you try it and it's just a little bit too hard, you can always just use the straight rectangles and glue them on like that, or you could draw them on later. That works just fine, but I like adding this little bit of kind of cool texture. So I'm folding it forward, folding it back, folding it up, folding it down, pull it up, got my zigzag line. I'll do the same thing right here. Pull it out. Ta-da! Now I've got my arms and my legs for my robot, and I need to glue those guys on there as well. So for these, I'm going to pick an end, and I'm just going to put some glue right on that end. And then wherever I want my arms to attach, maybe you can slide it underneath your shape. Maybe you can't, maybe it's too dry, that's okay. I just want it to look like my robot's arms are connected to his body. Push that down, and now I've got my flappy arms for my robot. Do the same thing on this one. Pick an end, put some glue on the end. Maybe I'll have this arm going up. I'm going to slide it underneath that little shape right there. Push it down with my finger. Keep it going. Let's do this one. Glue, glue, glue. I'm going to put it down here underneath my body. It's okay if it sticks off the edge of your paper. I think that makes it look a little bit more interesting. Put a little glue on here. Slide it on in. All right. So now my robot has a body, it has arms, it has legs. I'm going to put the cap back on my glue. Hear it click. Very important. And now we can use whatever coloring tools that you have, and we can start giving our robot some details. Like I said, I'm using markers. If you'd like to use crayons, you can use those too, or colored pencils, just whatever you have at your house. So the first thing I want to do is I want to connect these rectangles so it looks like my robot's body is all one piece. So I'm going to take my marker and I'm going to add some rectangles and color them in between. See what I did? Now it looks like they're a little bit more connected. And I add two little lines. Might not always be a rectangle, might be kind of a silly shape, but that's okay. I'm going to color it in. Keep on going. Two lines. Color it in. Two lines. Color it in. Now my robot is all connected to each other. So now I want to give my robot some eyes and nose and a mouth. So what shape do you think would be a good idea for the eyes? What do you think? Maybe a circle? So I'm going to use my marker. You could also use a pencil if you want to just be careful so that way you can erase. I'm going to give my robot one eye, and I'm going to make this other eye a little bit smaller. And then inside of my eye, I'm going to put another circle and a little circle in this one. That way my robot has eyes, eyeballs inside of his eyes. Then I'm going to use some rectangles, some more rectangles to give him some eyebrows. I think we should use a triangle for his nose. And I'm going to use a long curve for my robot smile. Just like that. So now what I want to do, now that my robot has a face, is I want to work my way down the body and I want to give my robot some different shapes that look like buttons and gears. So it looks like my robot does a lot of different things. So I'm going to add some different size buttons on here. I'm going to add a rectangle with some lines in it so it looks like maybe it's part of the machine, with some more buttons right here. Maybe on this one I'm going to add a little TV screen on my robot. So I'll use some more rectangles. We're just using shapes, just like what we already know how to do. I'll use some more circles so there's buttons for my TV. And then this one right here is going to be the control panel. So I'm going to do another rectangle. Maybe I'll put some rectangles for switches inside of it. And some more buttons along the side. Maybe my robot has a little antenna or something coming off of his head. So I just use some lines for that. And now I've got my robot with his arms and his different parts to him. So now my last step is I want to go through and add some color to these so that way they're not just plain. So I'm going to go through and color in the different parts of my robots, all those different little buttons. And here you have it. This is my shape robot collage. I used rectangles, I used circles, I folded to make a zigzag. We talked about how to use scissors, and we talked about how to use glue. I hope you had fun. Don't forget to share on the Flipgrid so we can see what you made.